Hello and welcome. Before we begin our journey tonight, I invite you to find a comfortable position. Whether you're lying in bed or resting somewhere quiet, let your body relax. Feel the tension in your shoulders soften. Let your breath slow, and your eyelids grow just a little heavier with every exhale. This is your time, a peaceful time, to unwind from the day, to slip gently into calm, restful sleep. Now let's begin. Slowly, gently. Long, long ago, before bells rang from towers, and before pocket watches ticked in gentlemen's coats, there was only the sky. And the sun, you see, has always been dependable. It rose in the east, arched gently overhead, and rested again in the west. Early people didn't need hours or minutes. Life moved slowly, with the sun. Morning meant work. Noon brought warmth. Evening whispered of rest. But slowly, as villages grew and work became more organized, people needed to understand time more precisely. Not to rush, no, but to know when to gather, when to pray, when to cook, or when to wait for someone's return. And so they began to notice that shadows moved like hands on an invisible clock. The first timekeepers were not devices, but people, observers of the sky, listeners to nature, quiet watchers of light and shade. They placed stones on the ground and noticed when a shadow reached each one. They marked the path of light on cave walls. These early markers were not inventions. They were slow realizations, carved by wonder. Imagine someone in 1500 BCE, perhaps in Egypt, gently tracing the shadow of a stick day after day, drawing curves in the sand. The earliest sundials were known by a humble name, the gnomon, a stick, or sometimes a thin pillar planted upright, nothing more. But the gnomon's shadow would move as the sun danced across the sky, and that simple shadow became a guide. In Greece, in Mesopotamia, and across ancient India, people began carving sundials from stone. Not just sticks now, but elegant, carefully measured tools. They carved curved faces that followed the tilt of the earth. They etched lines where shadows would fall. And so, a quiet kind of magic began. Not loud, not rushed, just the sun, a shadow, and the slow passing of the day. Some dials were horizontal, placed flat on the ground. Others were vertical, fixed to walls. You might walk past one without noticing. Just a stone plate on a temple wall, until the light hit it just right. People didn't check their sundials constantly. It wasn't that kind of time. Instead, they might glance when tending herbs in the garden, or when lighting an evening fire. As the centuries passed, sundials began appearing in town squares and gardens, on towers and in monasteries. In medieval Europe, monks used sundials to know when to pray. You might imagine the soft ringing of a bell, the rustle of robes, the smell of parchment and wax. Their time was divided not by hours, but by rhythms of devotion, matins before dawn, lauds as the sky lightened, vespers as the sun lowered again. In quiet cloisters, you might find a stone sundial nestled beside rosemary and lavender, as bees hummed gently nearby. The people outside the monasteries had simpler needs. Farmers rose with the sun, worked with their hands, and watched shadows to know when to rest beneath a tree. A merchant in a medieval market might glance up at a mounted sundial to decide when to pack up his wares. The sun told time softly, slowly. There were no alarms, only the golden arc of daylight. As towns grew, more precise sundials appeared. Some even had markings for half hours or quarter hours. Intricate ones in Italy and Germany became quite elaborate, with Latin inscriptions, zodiac signs, and decorative carvings. Some people crafted portable sundials, tiny folding tools carried in satchels or hanging on belts. But even these were slow tools. They worked only when the sun shone, and that was perfectly fine. When clouds came, people waited. Time paused. Imagine sitting in a quiet square, cobblestones warm beneath your feet, as you sip something simple and listen to the gentle hush of wind through linen banners, the sun hidden, the shadow gone. Time itself, it seems, had decided to rest. Across the world, in many lands, people had their own ways of reading the sky. In China, great sundials graced imperial courtyards. In India, the Jantar-Mantar observatories featured monumental instruments, casting long, majestic shadows. In the Islamic world, scholars refined sundial science with stunning precision, aligning them to Mecca and inscribing them with beautiful Arabic script. But always, no matter how large or small, the sundial spoke in silence. It whispered in shadow the story of the day. There was no urgency, no countdown, only presence. And perhaps that's what made it special. Time wasn't something to fight or beat or fill. Time simply was. Eventually, mechanical clocks came. Pendulums swung. Gears turned. Bells struck each hour with crisp regularity. But even now, in quiet gardens, old sundials still rest. Some are weathered, moss-covered, forgotten. But when the sun peeks through, they remember. And they tell time just as they always have. A gentle shadow on a quiet face, a whisper from the sky. So now, as you lie here, as shadows stretch across your own ceiling, and the day begins to drift away, know that time is not your enemy. It is soft and slow and steady. Let the sun carry your thoughts. Let the shadow guide you into stillness. In some old estates, you might still find them. A sundial resting in a walled garden, its stone face turned patiently toward the sky. Perhaps there are roses nearby, their petals opening toward the sun. Maybe a pair of ivy leaves curled gently around the base. The sundial doesn't move. It doesn't chime. It doesn't need to. Instead, it waits. And when the sun returns, it casts its soft mark, just a shadow, moving imperceptibly across the hours. Gardens like sundials understand time differently. Seeds take weeks to sprout, blossoms bloom, then fall, slowly, quietly. Perhaps that's why the sundial belongs here, where things are allowed to unfold in their own time. No urgency, just rhythm. High in the quiet mountains, far from towers and ticking clocks, people once used the sun to guide their way through the seasons. Shepherds, monks, travelers passing over ancient paths. They would look at the angle of the sun on the snow, the length of a shadow stretching across a cold stone, the way light fell in narrow mountain passes. Here, time wasn't divided into minutes or hours, but into meals, rests, and sunsets. The air was clean. The wind whispered gently through pines, and the sun was always just there, watching, moving, lighting the way. You might imagine someone pausing to drink from a clear stream, watching how the sunlight flickers on the surface, not checking a watch, just feeling the passage of time like a breath. Not all hours have names we remember. Once, people divided the day by the sun's position in the sky, not 12 o'clock or 3, but by feelings and changes in light. There was prime, the first hour after dawn, soft and quiet, when birds began to stir. Terse, a mid-morning lull, often marked by silence in the fields. Sext, when the sun stood high and work paused under the heat. None, the ninth hour, when lengthening shadows whispered of evening. And vespers, the golden hour, soft as candlelight, when families gathered again. These ancient hours weren't dictated by precision, but by poetry, by light, by presence. Imagine a world where each part of the day was a mood, not a task, where the sun told you when to rest, when to work, when to be still. Sundials were not just tools, but also storytellers. Many were carved with sayings, little poems, gentle warnings. Some read, "I mark only the sunny hours." Others whispered, "Time flies." And some, almost like a lullaby, "Rest, for the shadow shall return again." These phrases remind us that, even then, people were reflecting, thinking, wondering how to measure life not just in shadows, but in meaning. Some sundials were gifts, carved by hand and given to friends. Others were memorials, resting in graveyards, their shadows stretching across names now long forgotten. But still, they measure time, quietly, steadily, the way old friends sit in silence together. Imagine you're a traveler, centuries ago, setting out with a walking stick, a bag of bread and cheese, and a small portable sundial tucked into your cloak, made of brass perhaps, with a string for a gnomon, folded like a compass. You'd open it on a flat rock, tilt it toward the sun, wait, and slowly the shadow would fall, telling you where in the day you stood. Not exact, but enough. Maybe you'd sit there for a while enjoying the warmth, listening to distant bells from a village down below. The sundial didn't rush you. It didn't beep. It didn't blink. It simply waited to tell you something soft and true. You are here, now. What shape is time? For us today, it's linear. A line of appointments, deadlines, alarms. But once, time was circular. A sundial moves in a circle. The sun returns. Seasons loop. Shadows stretch and shrink, and stretch again. To the ancients, time didn't disappear. It cycled. Winter led to spring, to summer, to fall, to winter again. The sun left in the evening, but it always came back. And maybe that's why sundials are so comforting. They don't tell us time is running out. They show us it's returning. Everything moves in quiet rhythm, like breath, in and out. And so, the story of time, told by the sun, draws to a close. There's no rush here, no end you need to reach. Only the soft passing of moments, the hush of evening light, and the deep comfort of rest. May your dreams be peaceful, and your night full of gentle stillness. Good night, and sleep well.